right, Taylor Ham, Gig'em247.com. Here with another podcast. Have my guy Daddy98 with me. Our hot topic of discussion today is going to be basically about what we would do if we were putting together a recruiting support staff at Texas A&M. I know some things that I would do differently. I'm sure Paul has some things that he would do differently. We're going to kind of dive right into it. It's kind of unclear right now whether or not Kevin Sumlin has any plans to expand his recruiting support staff. But just for discussion's sake, if we had, let's say, $500,000 to spend on a recruiting staff, what would it look like? The infrastructure, I think, is going to be key to it. Paul, I'm going to have you kind of start off with your take. I'm going to kind of go into mine, but $500,000 on the table for you from the athletic director to go and spend it however you want to put together a staff. Of course, we have to keep it somewhat realistic. We're not going to go and say that, well, we're going to go hire this head coach over here and this coach over here. But, some realistic names for you guys to kind of keep things in perspective here about what it could potentially look like if they decide to go in that direction. Paul, your thoughts on, just first putting together the staff in its structure in itself.
Hey guys, I think the best way to look at this, and I think we've seen it quite a bit over the last particularly 7-8 years, is that in recruiting and evaluation, it's literally like investing in a business. And you need to do as much due diligence and mitigation of risk of every football player that you offer, that you take, so that if you can have 2 to 3 more hits a year versus misses, how much better is your team going to be? On paper, that can be the difference between 1 to 2 wins. And that's how important this is. So, the way I looked at this, and I've been kind of like harping on this for a while, I would actually make this a very, very important position. I don't even know if Alabama has it, in my opinion, the way I would do it. I would literally go try to get a former NFL general manager, one that maybe his time's passed him by a little bit. He's getting up there in age. I'm not talking about over the hill, but he's not going to be hired to be making $2 million a year, working for the Tennessee Titans. A guy like Floyd Reese, I looked him up. He's 67 years old. I don't know if he has any plans to retire, but there's a lot of people that don't want to retire. They still got the itch to scratch. Dick LeBeau is still coaching defensive coordinator today at whatever age he is, 87 or something crazy. And so there's going to be a lot of, and in addition, football coaches didn't get paid the kind of money that they get paid today, starting from about 10, 15 years ago. There's a lot of them that aren't necessarily rich. So I think there's an endless supply of really good talent evaluators, particularly people that have been head or of player personnel that could be your lead guy. And I think that's the main pivotal point. I think me and you have both talked about around $200,000. I think $200,000 right now in College Station, Texas. How many people in retirement get that from their Social Security and their investments in pure cash flow? So I think it's a very attractive position.
Yeah, I completely agree. And to be honest with you, I don't know if they necessarily need to go as large as Alabama. They have, I'm counting 7 football analysts right now, ranging from all sorts of different backgrounds. They're former head coaches, college head coaches, former players. There's a lawyer. There's high school coaches. It's kind of an eclectic group of football minds on their staff. There's nothing like it even close to compared to what they have put together in Tuscaloosa right now as far as recruiting support staff. I don't think they need to go that big, but they definitely need, like you said, kind of a general manager, in my opinion, and I think you'll agree with this, an offense and defensive guy, and then some guys underneath that that are diligent about finding prospects and going through and expediting some of the things that are most important to these coaches right now. So character evaluation, making sure their grades are in order, and there aren't any red flags there along the recruitments. I mean, we've seen just even here recently, guys like, Alden Robinson. who we've kind of hinted at for a long time. We've heard about these character issues. How come the A&M staff didn't hear about these? Because these were alarming issues with people close to Alton that weren't uncovered, or even it seemed like they may or may not have known about it. But on the outside looking in, it looks like they either ignored it or didn't know about it. And those are the types of things that get you in trouble when the kids get on campus. So for me, I don't think you need to go as big as Alabama to make it an effective recruiting support staff. I feel like what you need to do is get a strong general manager and then a strong offense and defensive guy and guys underneath them, got to kind of branch out to do that worker bee stuff. But the main guys are going to be the ones doing the evaluations, working with high school head coaches, working with people in the region to find these prospects, no matter what the star rankings are, to put them in front of these coaches, expedite all that groundwork. So when these, the actual A&M staffs going in a recruiting meeting and watching film, they know when they're watching a kid, okay, all these things are non-issues for us, because they'll be watching film and they'll see a kid and go, okay, well, does he have any problems? Why doesn't he have as many offers on the table as he does? All that work's done for them. What's your take?
Well, I got a little bit different perspective. Got a little of that echoing right now. I got a little bit different perspective than you do. The way I would do it is every recruit that I want to offer, I want it to be a process. I want to say, let's say we want to offer Kerry Vincent Jr., okay? And John Chavis is looking at him very closely, and we know his wrist, height isn't ideal, maybe size isn't ideal. Then you pop at the tape and you see ungodly speed. So you go, hey, and he's a legacy. He's going to probably stay committed, and he's going to be a good spokesperson for you. So you create your profile and your matrix on how to do a cost-benefit analysis. But I want every play he's ever had in varsity be watched by these talent evaluators, and then put out the 10 worst and 10 best. When Roger Holland was being recruited, and afterwards he had another player in Cy Falls, and Fran asked for their tape, and they sent us two games worth of tape and their highlights. So you didn't see all 10 or 11 games of Cy Falls that year. You saw 2 games, which are going to be sent, are going to be his best games, and you're going to see the highlights. But why can't you not mitigate the other 8 games?
Yeah, no, to stop you right there, I mean, that's kind of what Mike Sherman did, and that's why people kind of were upset with his, I guess, quote-unquote, slow offer process, because they would watch every single game and every single clip on the kid to try to find those bad plays. But go on.
Yeah, but, one thing is, if you have a person working 40, 50, 60 hours a week, and that's all they're doing, I think you can literally knock that out in 3 hours. Because you got to remember, an offensive player or defensive player is going to play 30 minutes of football. The worker bees are going to streamline out all the commercials and timeouts. You got 20-some minutes of plays. Yeah. And so you get it down to where you can watch a whole game in 30 minutes. So, there's a lot of ways that you can help evaluate players to get the best out there. But more importantly than that, I want to see a process to where, let's say Kevin Sumlin did take an NFL job. And let's say he took one on January the 15th, because it was, the NFL hires usually around the playoffs or afterwards. Would we be left in a huge pickle? Sure we would. The whole recruiting infrastructure should have huge databases with these players, with every piece of information we can gather, that these people could communicate it to the next coach so that they have every piece of information they can get. Here's who we have at receiver. Who are the next 5 best players that we've evaluated that they've shown interest that we can go back on? And in addition, I think we offered Kyle Deesh 4 weeks into his senior season. I don't believe we offered any more people in Texas until well into November, December, January.
Yeah, Ryan McCullum.
Meaning after the season. Well, all these great high school players, every week I want this staff looking at the guys that they go, hey, Parrish Cobb, there's a kid that had a great senior year. How come we offered him on January the 11th? He had an incredible playoff run. Everybody said he was one of the best players, if not the best player on the field. That guy should have had a great senior season. He should have been evaluated, identified, and offered in October or November when we would have had a chance to land him. When we offered him January 11th, it was like, what are we doing here? It was never going to happen. And so that's a perfect example of we need to cast our net bigger. Why were we only on one tight end at the end? We should have 25 tight end offers across the country. And if we do that and we're recruiting them during their senior year, we can get interest and see who can maybe come in for an official visit so that we have more fish. When we throw our net out on the water, we have more fish that we can catch. At the end, we were down to one linebacker. It was McCulloch or basically nobody, right?
Correct.
That was it. There was no other option. Why were we down to one good linebacker? I mean, we didn't have anybody else visiting. And you can debate whether Chapman and Akiki or Hansford are on to be a linebacker. I got that. But that's my point. We didn't have enough. And to me, this process is as important as I think the actual recruiting process. There are so many misses on players. And the reason that there are misses, besides just the character, I think there are misses on how they're going to fit, what are you looking for, and the mitigation of risk. The mitigation of risk means how can we scrutinize this player as hard as the NFL scrutinizes players coming out of the NFL draft. If the NFL didn't think it was worthwhile, they wouldn't have these huge scouting departments and all these millions of dollars being poured in, right?
Right.
So, I think it's a very small budget of what we're talking about. But we've learned that coaches in the season predominantly coach. Yeah, they'll go out and visit a game and leave at halftime. They're there to be seen. They're not scrutinizing that player because there's only so much you can do from the sidelines, and it's one half of one game, To me, they need to be scrutinized as much as you can. I do believe a guy like Mike Sherman went home. I think that's what I've listened to him before. He said, I like to read books and I like to watch tape. So you need lots of people that like doing that in order to get this to be a well-oiled machine.
And so if we're talking about potential candidates at some of these positions, obviously a Mike Sherman, who's coaching high school, I think, football right now, would be a great candidate. But as far as, maybe some of those guys underneath the GM, so to speak, because there's all sorts of different names that we could float out there. But, I feel like you got to go and get someone, in my opinion, at the high school rank, either head coach, recruiting coordinator, such, to come in and take over the offense or defense evaluations and being able to identify talent. For me, I think we'll probably have a little bit of varying opinions on who we would go get at each position. I think I would go and get a head coach that's very well respected, that's very well connected in Texas, and I would go get one in Louisiana, your two top recruiting markets. So, maybe a Joey McGuire and, maybe Coach Hull over at Warren Easton, who's been so good to Texas A&M, or Coach Jerwin Wilson, who's has strong ties to Texas A&M, loves the program, loves Coach Sumlin, very close to Terry Joseph, guys like that. Those would be two of my picks, and then you would go find guys underneath them, maybe a Coach Mann over at Crosby, who's making probably okay money, but would get a bump at Texas A&M and an opportunity to go work for an SEC program and move up the chain of command there, but knows this area, understands the ins and outs. All you have to do is follow him on Twitter, and really you'll be able to see he understands the recruiting process and what it takes nowadays for college coaches to go and to all these high schools and land kids. It takes work. I think he tweeted that the other day. You can't just walk in there with the logo on your shirt anymore. You have to put in the time and effort into these prospects, and that's important. And so I think that's going to be something, within NCAA regulations, of course, but these recruiting support staff, this team would be able to be kind of a liaison between the program and the high school programs themselves, and that's going to help, again, expedite the groundwork that a lot of these coaches have to put in before they can decide who they don't target. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I'm not disagreeing with the disagree or however. I think a lot of high school head coaches are going to have a hard time coming until this position is something that every school in America wants to put money into, where they start making that a money war. Because I don't think there's a lot of schools that truly have this. They hire consultants, but not really the way I'm looking at it, which is basically like an NFL player personnel office, which is, I don't know if the head coach, I'm kind of looking at more of the older coaches that the game's kind of passed them by, not in their intellect, but in their, Tom Rossley, the guy that brought in Johnny. He's 67, 70 years old. I'm not using him, but guys like that have been head coaches at SMU. They've got 40, 50 years of coaching experience. They've seen players come and go. There's just so many guys that have come out of the NFL, which is the highest level of evaluation talent, or even college guys that have gotten too old for the game, where they're no one's really hiring them. I think those are an easier catch, because you're trying to get someone that says, hey, you know what, I didn't want to retire. I'm 62 years old. No one wants me really recruiting for them, but I can be in the personnel department. That's kind of how I see it, but that doesn't mean that the high school guys wouldn't be great. I just don't know if they're going to be willing to say, I'm going to leave a head coaching job that I'm making $110 for, to come over to do that. I'm not sure they'll want to do that.
Yeah, for sure. And the allocation of money is going to be the big thing. And like we said, if you had $500,000, how would you allocate it? Of course, the GM and then the head of offense and defense would be the ones that are bringing in the most cash there. But still, I think it would make sense for me if I'm going to go and put together a staff, one that just understands the groundwork of recruiting, understanding relationships with high school coaches, and being able to leave no stone unturned. How many times do we see kids kind of slip through the cracks? I mean, heck, A&M has one on campus right now. Thank goodness that they were able to kind of get a heads up from, actually one of 24/7 Sports posters about the kid for Zarian Harrison, who's on campus. Those are the types of things that need to happen regularly. And you look at Alabama getting on guys all the time that they just seem to be one step ahead, at the JUCO ranks, the graduate transfers. I mean, everything that they do, it seems to be just on point all the time. They're never kind of behind the eight ball in any big recruitment or any kid that is starting to blow up. They're usually right on top of it.
Yeah, they're proactive or forward thinkers, not reactive or anything like that. As you said, the graduate transfer tackle, even the what people forget, Donovan Wilson, who was committed to Utah. Alabama was bringing him in when we offered him, and we were tipped off by the same poster, I think, on the linebacker on Donovan Wilson, very good player, but it had been great. Who offered Mike Evans? I mean, literally, I think it was down to nobody and us. I don't know if he had a firmly committable offer after his senior season. So, how do we find him? You can't tell me that's the only guy in America that's like that. And look how talented he is. There's so much of that. If you have a full-time staff that's committed to doing that, I can't see how this would not be a very effective way. Like I said, if you look at it in business investment way, if you can land 2 to 3 more kids per class that are hits, That's as many as 9 to 12 players better on your program. You don't leave 5 to 7 scholarships to end because you got players that are there that you can go pick up. That you go, hey, because that's what happened with Mike Evans. We missed out on a wide receiver. I think it was that guy that went to Oklahoma, and a lot of the kids had some grade risk. And next thing you know, we offered Mike Evans, and everybody's like, well, who's this? I think it's such an important aspect of the program.
And I think it's
honestly. Go ahead.
I think it's okay if you have a turnover within this recruiting support staff. I think you just need to put one together. I mean, I know this is kind of off a whim here, but you look at Larry Fedora, a great head coach over at Navasota, out of a job. Why not bring him on for, if a few months or a year, if it ends up being, a full-time gig for him. But a guy that can help you bridge some gaps and maybe some high schools that you're not able to really do well in, to evaluate that region. I mean, he's a guy that I feel like either way, it's some sort of capacity can bring value to your program and your recruiting or support staff.
Oh, there's no question about that. I don't think you can get Lee Fedora, but I think he'll have a head coaching gig literally thrown to him. But it's definitely one of those things where he may want to get into that role. You're correct. I was kind of even thinking all those years Alan Waddell when he retired. Those are the kind of guys I think are going to be available for you that you can definitely do. So. I think there's a lot of ways to do it, but I would rather go with quality over quantity.
Yeah.
If I had just one person, and that one person's job was to basically say, I don't want to miss on talent, and I want to be, and I had to give them all $500,000. I think that could be a lot. I personally think that's a much more effective position than to have lots of people that are just guys trying to figure out football, which is what we have now. I don't want a guy that got a physical science degree, wants to be a football coach, never really played except in high school, stays around A&M for 2 or 3 years, working for nothing, doing the video cutting up and all that stuff. No, let's go get someone that's retired that's been in the NFL office that has evaluated talent. And then you say, hey, you got anybody else on offense and defense? Who was your best scout for 30 years? Who's your best offensive scout for 30 years? Well, how old are they? Well, they're 65. They're out of the game. They're not rich. They're not poor, but they wouldn't mind $115,000 a year. Well, let's look and get in that person. I think that is very attractive, and that can get it. I think we can build that infrastructure very easily. And then I also would have. I think it's absolutely crucial, and I've stated this before. We may not be able to beat Alabama and LSU head to head for recruit, but we can be. There's no reason they should outwork us, out-evaluate us. We should be the best at getting questionable grade kids into school. We had this TD and Bowden situation. We know that we tried and we're doing our best and we're going to hope to get in. But I want to be proactive with the NCAA. When he committed to us, I don't know what he was doing, but I know that the grades are the slight scale. Why can't we be the best at doing that? When it comes to junior college players, we can be the best at knowing which kids will get into school. Have it down, be proactive. If there's 2 or 3 classes that are going to be debatable, be proactive with the NCAA on getting answers. I don't know if it's easier said than done, but I would have a role just for doing that. Every football player is, to me, almost a $500,000 investment. So, if we pay someone $75,000 a year that just does nothing but make sure we're the best at handling kids that have questionable grades, that's worth it.
Yeah, I agree. I completely agree. Well, we're going to wrap this up real quick. Some just final thoughts on whether you think this is going to happen or not. I mean, we can discuss it. We can debate different ways about putting together this recruiting support staff. I think there's a lot of ways that I feel like you could go with this that can be effective. I don't think there's anything wrong with tweaking it to fit your program, your system, your coaching staff. Because when it comes down to it, you get a GM type like a Mike Sherman, and it could very well, with all the egos involved, get a little hectic there in those recruiting meetings. So I don't have a problem with tweaking it, but it's something, in my opinion, that needs to happen. Do you think it's going to happen? And if so, yes or no? What direction would you like to see Kevin Sumlin and the staff go with, potentially with just in general in the recruiting efforts?
Well, I don't think it'll happen. I think they'll hire a couple of people that are, ex-high school coaches or something, and they'll be low paid, and they'll be a little bit better than going with the LaGrostas, for instance, or somebody like that. But the truth of the matter is, it takes a lot of swallowing pride as a head coach to give up that. But I look at it as a third party. I want to say, hey, Jim Turner, you've offered these linemen. Well, here's what our head of player personnel and our offensive head of player personnel, how they evaluate your offers and who they like as much or better, and compare the two. And these guys, I want to even increase the scope and evaluate maybe scrimmages and practices so that our coach evaluates his players, and then so do these guys. And then what happens is the head coach can read both reports. Here's what I view and here's what I view. This makes a systematic process to where you have as much intellectual capital as you can to make sure you're getting the most out of it. Let me give you an example. There's been a huge discussion on Jermaine Illuminer. And I have been told by many people, this was not, that Christensen just did not care for him. And then we see him play. He's excited right now. Supposedly he graded out pretty good in the bowl game. He was a JUCO brought in. They redshirted him. He's the most strongest and probably the biggest player and the oldest right now on our offensive line. I expect him to start next year, right? Christensen did not play him last year, and we played a freshman and a JUCO transfer that most people felt physically was not really SEC quality. Like, he was a good player, wasn't quite an SEC player, okay? So it would be very nice if you're the head coach and you're trying to scrutinize the offensive line, which I don't think it's something that someone does. I think he gives the offensive line coach every bit of power. It'd be nice to have that third party saying, here's what I'm seeing. Oh, by the way, how effective is our offensive line? Well, it's not doing that good. We got a freshman that we saw against Arizona State was clearly not ready. He was just not physically or mentally ready to play in that game. Will he be a good player? Absolutely. Was it that game? Do we have anybody else? Oh, yeah, we got a fourth-year senior that's on the bench right now. So what's a consultant say on this? That's coach and scouted players. Because that's what general managers do. They don't just evaluate the rookies. They're doing the guys for free agents. So I think this is where I like to see it go. And I think it becomes a process to where you have checks and balances to have the most efficient football team you can have.
Well, good stuff. I think that's going to wrap it up for our podcast this time. Thanks for tuning in, and we appreciate all the feedback that we get. I think from here, the discussion and stuff could lead into another podcast. So everyone give their feedback, join along in the discussion, and, of course, we appreciate everyone's support.
Here you go.